Hello everyone, I'm Anthea Lang and I am a local historian, and I also write text for the Alan Godfrey, some of the Alan Godfrey old Ordnance Survey maps. And here I am today in you can see, a very socially distanced conversation with the great man himself. We're actually about 10 miles apart, I think. And Alan, it's very nice to see you this afternoon.
Hello, Anthea.
Now, obviously, many businesses have had a really difficult time of it over this last year. But actually, Alan Godfrey Maps has done well, hasn't it?
Yeah, yes. We didn't think we would. We were quite frightened at the beginning, end of March last year. But by middle of April, by about this time, it was apparent that people were buying our maps. People were at home doing their family history or their local history. And we were going to be okay. And so, though I'd thought of having to furlough somebody, we didn't have to furlough anyone, and we carried on. It's been quite difficult because quite often Donna's been in the office alone, or Suzanne's been in the office alone, because we've kept them very socially distanced. And I've had to cut back on my travel, but yes, we've done pretty well. Pretty well.
Well, that's good. It's nice to know that some people have done well. But obviously, the coronavirus epidemic has affected the way that you've had to work, hasn't it?
Very much so, because from my own point of view, I normally do a lot of traveling. I normally do 2-3 long distance train journeys every month. I haven't been on a train for over a year. So the traveling has been cut right back. I haven't been to London, haven't been to Manchester, haven't been to Edinburgh. And so I've had to reevaluate that and think, which areas do I publish maps of? So it's concentrated the mind, really. So that's had some benefits, really. I think long-term benefits.
Yeah, I can imagine, that you have had to rethink things quite a little bit. And talking about that, and if people don't know, Alan produces maps throughout the country. But obviously travel has been very limited for you. And I know that as part of the map world that you occupy, you do produce single maps, but you also produce groups of maps, don't you?
I think we're concentrating much more on that. For instance, down in the south, one of our authors, Tony Painter, has just written the notes for 8 maps of Southampton. And another author, Pamela Taylor, has been writing 10 maps for the London Borough of Enfield, quite concentrated. And it's made it easier for them to research, to concentrate their visits and so on. And similarly here, obviously last April, May, I couldn't really go out anywhere. But beginning of June, I thought, where can I go? Perhaps end of May and beginning of June, I suppose. And I decided to do 10 maps of the Stockton and Darlington area. And the two boroughs, they link, don't they, because of the Stockton and Darlington Railway. We think of them together of that. And I thought those are within perhaps 40 minutes drive of where I live. I could go there, have a walk around and come back within 4 hours, 3.5, 4 hours. And it's quite a manageable distance, really. And that was permissible. And so I got the maps and thought, right, I'll do 10 maps within Stockton and Darlington. The plan was to do 5 Darlington and 5 Stockton. In fact, it's been 4 Darlington and 6 Stockton. But really, we've done them within a year. The last 2 are coming out this week, being published this week. And been fun to do, great fun to do.
Now, somebody who doesn't know these areas might well be listening to this interview thinking, well, can you do, 6 maps on one area, particular area, You know, you talked about the Southampton maps. You know, can you do 8 maps of Southampton? Are they, you know, is there a difference between them? Is what I'm really asking you.
Well, they're all linking up, and the Southampton ones link up as a batch. We did 2 for Eastleigh and 8 for Southampton. Now with these, it's certainly possible. Stockton Borough is a fairly big area, so we've done 2, 3 which are really Stockton. There's one which covers Egglescliffe and Yarm, which is in Stockton Borough, and a couple for Thornaby. So we've really got quite useful maps, and 2 or 3 we've done already. We just done them for different dates, but we hadn't done Old Thornaby. That was new. Yarm and Egglescliffe was completely new to the series, and part of Thornaby, the outskirts around where's now Teesside Park, which is where Stockton Racecourse was, that's new to the series. So we've expanded the series, and in Darlington we've done a couple for the town, but we've gone down to Herworth, and we've done Middleton St George, where I'd never been before, and never been to Herworth. So it's been wonderful walking around, exploring these places. And because they're quite near, most of them I've been able to go to twice. So an early visit, then write the notes, and then go back again, have a little walk around to see if there's anything else I needed to correct or add or remove. And lo and behold, there we are. 10 maps of Stockton and Darlington. That isn't. What we do now ask is we have a subscription schemes now. And so if we're going to do 10 maps, we offer people a subscription. They have to pay in advance, buy in advance, and they get them at a reduced price. They don't know which titles they're going to get. They just know they're going to be 10 of that area. We've just launched a new one for 10 maps of Nottinghamshire, where the first map will come out in probably July, and another for Wiltshire, where the first map will come out in June, we think. It was going to be July, but we're making good progress. So Tony Painter's going to write on Wiltshire, and Barry Trinder's going to write about the Nottinghamshire maps. So those are real groups, and people subscribe. They help us. It's a big help to us, not just financially, but an encouragement. Actually, we think, oh, we've got 40 people or 50 people want these maps of Nottinghamshire or Leeds and Wakefield. We did. That was very successful. We're currently preparing some for County Durham, where enough people subscribed in advance, we can really go ahead. We're doing places like Willington and West Auckland, which we hadn't covered before.
So it's quite a surprise. So people are paying in advance for the series of maps, and what will exactly drop through their letterboxes.
Yeah.
Intriguing.
Yeah.
Intriguing.
Yes, it is. But I think we tell them which area it's going to be. And with the Durham ones we did, because once I'd finished research on the Stockton and Darlington, it seemed to make sense to do another area in the northeast. And of course, travel has been very restricted over the last few months. Even going down to Stockton, Darlington wouldn't really have been acceptable. Yeah. But I thought, I could go within a few miles genuinely for work. And so we've done these maps. I mean, one of them is going to be Ledgate, which is where the office is based. But most are going to be really the Weardale area from, I suppose, Bishop Auckland and Spennymoor westward to Walsingham and West Auckland.
Right. Well, going back to the Darlington and Stockton maps for a little bit, there's quite a variety between these maps, because some of them are very busy. They're absolutely packed with all sorts of things and industries, and but some of them are much quieter maps with maybe not so much to talk about. Are they quite difficult to write?
Not really. I think the Old Thornaby is probably the emptiest one, and that was interesting and one of the most enjoyable, because Old Thornaby's got this little church, tiny old medieval church, and very difficult to get inside churches at the moment, unless you're very lucky. But I was there, I'd walked down from the main part of Thornaby, and I was walking there. I thought, this is a nice church, and I took photos. And lo and behold, the vicar walked out. So I sort of sidled up and said pleasantries, and he nicely invited me in to have a little look around. So it was really enjoyable. It was really nice to go inside buildings if you're writing about them. But that was quite a more difficult one to write because part of it was empty. But it's an important map because it links up Thornaby. And of course, on the other side, you're getting the southern part of Stockton as well. So there's enough to form a useful map for forming part of a group.
Yes, and of course, one common feature on many of the maps is, of course, the railway or railways, because there were a number. Now, there may be people listening who aren't aware of the importance of the link between Stockton and Darlington. So maybe you'd just like to explain that briefly?
Well, the Stockton and Darlington Railway, which opened in 1825, I think, generally speaking, the two most famous early railways are the Stockton and Darlington and the Liverpool and Manchester. And many would say the Stockton and Darlington was the beginning of the railway age, I think. I mean, there are other railways which are older, old wagonways and so on. But the Stockton and Darlington Railway, it was a major milestone. And and it sort of links these two towns. I mean, I think in many ways they're rival towns. And though the railway was encouraged in the first place by people from Stockton, then the families and business families in Darlington rather took it over, and that became a source of resentment. But it's, of course, it links so many of these maps, not just Darlington and Stockton, but there was a branch down to Herworth, the Croft branch, and it went through Middleton St George, the Fighting Cocks branch, as it was later called. So it linked these maps to some extent. And interestingly, recently, when I've been researching the maps of West Durham, the Stockton and Darlington Railway is evident there again. It's there in West Auckland. It's there in a map I've been researching for Witten Park. And so it's been a common factor in a lot of my research over the last 10 months, really.
And you do like railways, don't you?
I quite like railways, yes. I have to say I like railways, but I haven't much missed not travelling on them this last year. That does surprise me. I did some maps of Yorkshire in the summer when we were able to travel more, and I drove and stayed in hotels, and it's quite surprised me how little I have missed the railways. But I'll probably be going back onto the trains in a few weeks' time.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure we all will eventually. one of these days. Now, one of these lovely maps, Thornaby-on-Tees and Stockton, 1892, is in colour, which is very exciting. And I know you do produce a number of coloured maps, but fairly obvious question, are these more expensive to produce?
Oh yes, quite a lot more. I mean, the printing costs are 2.5 times as much, so they're significantly more. We have done quite a few in Yorkshire, and this just seemed a chance because the Yorkshire 25-inch map series was much later than the Durham ones. So this, though Stockton in the 1890s was onto the second edition maps, Yorkshire hadn't been covered until then. And so we found this, and it sort of dovetails with the Durham maps, and it was in colour, and I thought this was a real chance to get a Durham/Yorkshire map in colour. They are lovely. They were hand-coloured for the Ordnance Survey, initially by apprentices, later by women, and this was really almost the end of them doing that. Within a year or two, they were phasing it down, and you just got a little bit of blue for the rivers and so on. But here you're getting fairly full cover, and of course, where it's a fairly busy map, they look great, I think.
Yes, certainly do. Certainly. What else can I ask you? You might assume that maps in a series would be in one county, but in this case, you do straddle two counties, don't you?
I do. A lot of them are along the border. The Herworth-on-Tees map has part of Crofton, which of course is in Yorkshire. And that really is, you do get a sense of this because the railway branch, which is called the Croft branch, doesn't actually go into Yorkshire at all. It stays within Durham. The map of Yarm, I've called it, it's Egglescliffe and Yarm. I called it Yarm and Egglescliffe because Yarm is so much the better known of them, but of course Egglescliffe is in Durham and Yarm is in Yorkshire. And Stockton is really interesting. It's unique, isn't it? Because it does straddle the border. Stockton is in Durham, of course. Thornaby, of course, is in Yorkshire. And she's the only existing borough which straddles two counties with each separate for what you might call ceremonial purposes. And I believe it's unique in that. So Thornaby is still ceremonially in Yorkshire, Durham very much in County Durham. And I've tried to respect this because a couple of the maps are from the Yorkshire series covering the Thornaby area. But it gets very confusing. Often I've just chosen the one where the sheet lines are better.